Hello, everyone, and welcome back for our next session during Big Data Days 2024. And for the next hour and a half, I have a tremendously amazing speaker for you. Paul Colmer, better known as Digital Colmer, is a senior technical trainer at Amazon Web Services, specializing in machine learning and generative AI. His passion is helping customers, partners, and employees develop and grow through compelling storytelling, shared experience, and knowledge transfer. With over 25 years in the IT industry, he specializes in agile cultural practices and machine learning solutions. Paul is a fellow of the London College of Music and fellow of the British Computer Society. And today he's going to talk to us about democratizing generative AI with Amazon Q and Amazon Bedrock. Paul, I'm extremely happy to have you back here this year for the third year in a row. So your sessions are always very well attended, very highly rated. So I'm super excited that you are with us here again this year.
Thank you so much, Jan Willem. Thank you, everybody, for attending. So very warm.
Good, floor is yours.
Go on, you go. Wonderful. So thank you, Jan Willem. Thank you for a wonderful introduction. Very warm welcome to the session, everybody. Good day, Sophie. Good morning, Surab. Please interact via the session messages, and I will definitely interact with yourself. As Jan Willem said, I'm Paul Colmer. I've been in AWS now for about 4 years. I'm a senior technical trainer. I've actually just done an 8-hour day already of a course called Cloud Operations. But I'm super pumped and excited to give you something a little bit different. So talking about Amazon Q Business and Amazon Bedrock. So the way this session will work, we've got about an hour and a half together, and I'll tailor it according to what your questions effectively and how you want to run this session. So we're focused mainly on Q Business, and if we get time, we'll do about 20-30 minutes at the end on Amazon Bedrock, and I'll talk about the differences of those two products. So really, Q Business, the way to think about Q Business is really it's a chatbot that would allow you to answer questions of your business data. So you plug in your business data, and I'll show you how that works through some demos in a moment. And effectively, when you ask a particular question, it will consult those business sources first. It will then pass it to a large language model and then formulate an answer and come back to you. So very much a chatbot, but designed for organizations. So that's the first product we're focused on. The second product is really designed for developers. It allows us to write some code to be able to talk to a foundation model, and there are a number of foundation models in Bedrock on offer. An example is the Llama 2 model. Claude 3 is another one. There's a range of them. We can write code to feed it a prompt to that foundation model and receive a response back. Now, I'll be demonstrating the playground part of that, which is non-technical. So if you're not technical, you'll enjoy that piece. But I will also quickly show you some code within the SageMaker notebook, Jupyter notebook, and talk you through how that code works. And that will give you a bit of an in-depth. So really, two parts of this talk. The first part really focused on more non-technical prompt engineering using Amazon Q Business and getting hopefully some great results. And then the second part, diving into Amazon Bedrock, using the Amazon Bedrock playgrounds, and then showing you some code towards the end and showing you how you can get started with Amazon Bedrock. So most of the session devoted to non-technical people, hopefully, like yourselves. And then the second half, a little bit more technical, diving into some Python code at the end. Fantastic. So today I'm going to demonstrate mainly with hands-on demonstrations and sketches and some discussion. Welcome, Angel. Thank you so much. Good morning to you too. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining the session. That's Jan Willem. Fantastic. So keep those questions and comments coming. So 4 years at AWS, about a year and a half as a technical account manager, and now I work as a trainer, and that's been about two and a half years. Fantastic. I love all the clapping of hands just scrolling up there. I specialize in generative AI shortly after joining AWS using a tool called AWS Decomposer. That was the talk I did in 2022. Then I moved on to Bedrock. That was last year's talk. And then this year is Amazon Q. Now, I said when I advertised this particular session that I wouldn't have any PowerPoint. I have one slide of PowerPoint, and this is the slide. Now, I'm based in Brisbane, Australia. So it's about 6 p.m. here, and we have a tradition here in Australia where we always recognize the traditional custodians of country. So this is called acknowledgement of country. So that's what we're going to do. So in the spirit of reconciliation, AWS acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. That's all the PowerPoint. Now, let me try sharing some links in the chat. Let me just minimize this piece. Now, if you're interested in learning more about Q, I'm just going to pop this in the chat. I think this link will work. There's a little link I popped in the chat, which is a link to a course called A Hands-On Look at Amazon Q Business Expert. It's a course that I put together myself. It's published in an app called Skill Builder, which is part of AWS Skill Builder. It's free to register, and that course is free for you all. So if you want to learn more about Amazon Q and dive a little bit deeper, that's an hour talk right down to some of the core architecture components. If we get time, I'll demonstrate some of those components. If we don't, then you've got plenty of time to have a look at that course and check it out. So free course for you all. Of course, this talk's based on the course, so anything you missed here, you can catch up in the course there. So like I said, I'm going to show various practical demonstrations and digital sketches to help enforce the concepts of Amazon Q Business and Amazon Bedrock. Cool. So Amazon Q is a generative AI assistant that is designed for work. It's essentially a chatbot for business. It can be tailored to your business, your data, your code, and your operations. You configure all of your organizational data sources within the Amazon Q application, and Amazon Q starts indexing all of your data and content. It's learning everything there is to know about your business. This includes understanding the core concepts, product names, organizational structure, all the details that make your business unique. Now, as well as indexing the data from these sources, Q also uses generative AI to understand and capture the semantic information which makes your business unique. This additional semantic information is captured as something called vector embeddings, and that's part of the indexing process. So it allows Q to provide highly relevant results which are tailored to your specific company and industry. And so when we feed a prompt into Amazon Q Business, it will first of all look at the prompt, understand whether any of the data sources you have configured can provide any additional context to that prompt. It goes to that index, compares it with what you've written, takes any relevant information, maybe it's information from a website or information from a Salesforce data store that you have, combines it with your prompt, and then feeds it into a large language model or a foundation model behind the scenes that lives in Amazon Bedrock. And the result that you see back is the results from Bedrock. So that's the second part of the demonstration. I'll be showing you under the hood what Bedrock is doing. Cool. So first of all, let's have a little look. Let me just share the documentation on Amazon Q. And I'm just going to then share or show that link on my screen. Wonderful. Here we are. So Amazon Q Business. So this is where you can start to understand how some of the benefits of Amazon Q, how to get started, lots of good links. Now, what I'm going to do now is jump straight into a demo. So I feel that Amazon Q is a sort of tool. It's a bit like any sort of chatbot. It really only makes sense when we start using it. So let me just find my console login. Give me a moment. Looks like it wants me to sign in again. That's fine. Let me just take this off the screen. Give me one moment, team. Let's log in. So let me just log in off the screen. There we go. That's come through. This is information I don't really want to share. Now in the AWS console, what I can do Amazon Q Business at the top. Now what I've done, and I'll show you how to do this later, is I've created an application. And this application only takes a few clicks to set up, and I'll show you how to do it a little bit later. Doesn't require you to write any code. It's simply very easy to set up in the console. And I'll show you that a little bit later. But the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to show you in the console here the application. And I wanted to, I just realized the link's on this page, and I wanted to log into this application. So let me just log in. That will take a moment. I just got to try and remember the password now. Give me 1 second, team. I may need to get my password finder out if I can't remember. Yep, I've got that right. Let me just enter my authentication. So this is the sort of experience that a user will see as well. They'll click on the URL, they'll enter their password, and then they'll have to enter their multi-factor authentication code. So I'm just doing that. I've got my phone right next to me. Let's sign in, and that will take us to the Amazon Q application. So this is an application that you can create and publish within your own organization. So here we are in Amazon Q. You can see I've got quite a few things pre-prepared, but let's do something that's not pre-prepared. So what I've done behind the scenes, and you can see this on the other screen here, this is the app that I've just launched. You can see here that I configured 2 data sources. I've configured a data source is pointing to my website, and I've configured a data source pointing to the Amazon training website. And the reason I've done that is because there's some public information that I want to consult when I enter the prompt in the chatbot first, before it throws it into Amazon Bedrock, and then the large language model or the foundation model does its magic. So I'm using effectively knowledge here that it doesn't already have. And so because I pointed it to the AWS website, I can ask it questions around AWS training and certification services. So for example, what is AWS Cloud Quest? So what it's doing now, it's consulting the two indexes I've set up, looking at what relevant information may exist in those data sources and pulling them in. And so what it's done, it's come back with a response. And what's interesting is it tells me where the information has come from, the sources. That's really important. So you can see here, that's the training website. That's the training website. Certification site, certification. So that's all pulled from my data source that I configured. Now, as you'll see, as we work through the demonstration, that we can configure not only public data sources, I'm using public ones here because they're just easier to set up. You can also configure your own organizational data sources. So you might have a SharePoint repository, for example, that you want to use for context for your prompts. You might have an email system that you want to pull in, maybe have Salesforce information. And I'll show you the different connectors that you could use to pull in potentially index that information, and then the chatbot will be able to look at your prompt, decide whether any of the data sources you configure can add additional context, and then feed all that into the foundation model. Hopefully that will make sense. Awesome. So let's have a look. AWS Cloud Quest is a 3D role-playing game that helps users build practical AWS cloud skills. So because I'm from Training and Cert, if you've not tried a Cloud Quest, there is a free one available in Skill Builder. It's a similar link to the one that I've sent there. So the previous link there was Amazon Q in Skill Builder. There's also a Cloud Quest. Cloud Quest Cloud Practitioner, which leads to a certification, is a free 3D role-playing game that you can try out that gives you hands-on labs. So I figured while I'm here, I'll introduce you to some of our other training and cert services. Wonderful. Let me know if anybody's got any questions so far. Cool. So like we said, we're going to specifically cover Amazon Q Business Expert, but be aware that there are different versions of Amazon Q. So I'm just demonstrating one version here. So let me quickly show you the other versions, or talk through them quickly, just so we can position them. This is the one I'm demonstrating today, Q Business. Amazon Q Developer is a chatbot that you can use to help write code and to help you with various tasks. one of the things that I can do in my console here, for example, is if I click on this icon on the top right, it will display Amazon Q. And I've been using this in my course today. I had some questions that were a little bit tricky to answer. You're probably not going to understand the products, but I had a question from a student that said, when I add an event in a service called AWS Incident Manager, can I send that event to someone via an email? And the answer is yes. And it explains exactly how to do it. And this is accurate because I checked it, and the data sources. So that's just a taste of Amazon Q Developer. That's the easiest way to get started. You can do it in the console. You'll need to register for Amazon Q. There is a free version, but you're limited to 25 entries in here. The paid version basically is $20, I think, USD per month, per user per month. And then there are additional charges for how many documents you're indexing as part of that Amazon Business data source configuration, which I'll show you later. Cool. Hope that will make sense. Wonderful. Now let's go back to Amazon Q. Sorry, Amazon Q. We'll just finish off those other versions quickly. So we had business developer. We can also use Amazon Q with QuickSight. So QuickSight is a really good way of visualizing data. So we can do graphing, dashboarding, pie charts, a range of different things. So we can use Amazon Q to create visualizations using natural language. Another option here is using Amazon Connect. So this can help your service agents provide a better customer service. So Amazon Connect is a call center offering. So you can deploy a call center literally in minutes. And Amazon Q, when integrated with Amazon Connect, will on the fly consult the data sources that you've configured and be able to help answer customer questions that are asked in real time by your customers to your agents. And the agents can ask in real time while they're chatting to their customer through Q to get some answers. And then we have supply chain, which is coming soon. So back to Amazon Q Business. Just checking for any questions. No questions. If you do have questions, pop them there, please. And also, if there's any problems with the sound, just let me know as well. So back to Q. Now, let's talk about why would we use Amazon Q Business Expert. Let me draw out some examples of some of the employees that can take advantage of Amazon Q. You can already see on the screen now, I've got a number of recent chats. I'm going to use these to drive how to use Q and how to get the most out of Q Business, mainly with prompt engineering. But before I do that, I'm going to segue to my sketch and demo pad. Now, I usually use a different application. The only reason I'm using this one is because the latency on my usual application is a bit slow, but this one seems to be quite good. So let's try here. So the types of employees that can use Q. This list is not exhaustive. It's just some examples. Employees, I think I spelled that right. Marketing manager. So, for example, one of the roles of a marketing manager and a marketing team is to create content. And so we can use Amazon Q to help us with creative writing, for example. We've got our sales manager. We might have a situation where our sales manager has just employed a new sales representative, and that sales representative has to take over from another sales rep. Rather than have the new sales manager interrogate all the systems manually, so in other words, going through the CRM system and understanding the customers they have, and manually going through emails and manually going through other data sources, we could use Amazon Q to ask, what are the customers under this jurisdiction, and it will list them out. Are there any customers that are strategic? And again, based on the data it receives, it'll help you answer those questions. And it will help the new sales manager get across in minutes, as opposed to hours or even days, around the customer, around maybe what the customer is interested in, based on the data in the CRM system. And from there, he can very easily understand what leads he might need to chase up with those customers. We've got developers. So developers can use particularly the Amazon Q developer version to help write code. But we can also utilize that using Amazon Q as well. help desk employees, product managers. These are just some of the examples. So Amazon Q Business Expert helps you answer questions based on your organization's data sources. It can also do public data sources, which I'm demonstrating a moment ago. And so if you work in sales, you can ask it a question about the sales information you have collected. If you're working marketing, it can help you generate a catchy tagline or marketing slogan. If you work in an area of the business where you need to summarize some information from a list of documents, I'm currently working with a solution architect and a customer on exactly that use case. So a very simple example, say in public sector, might be there's a range of, for example, policy documents that are published by a particular public sector entity, maybe around tax or legal or something. We can ingest those documents and we can ask it to summarize maybe the legal position or the policy position of that particular public sector department. We can also use the summarization to summarize maybe a meeting transcript. So if we're able to, again, we need permission of the people involved in the meeting, but we could record the meeting. We could then use a tool to translate the speech to text. We could then feed in that text into our large language model through an upload, through long day it's been, through Amazon Q, through an upload. You can then ask it to summarize the action items and the owners, because that conversation could be running for, say, 60 minutes. And in just, I don't know, in 30 seconds, you can ask the chatbot what the action items were and the owners, and it will work very quickly through the material and give you that information. I've seen actually many use cases of customers doing that too. You can compare products. You can highlight pros and cons from documents you upload. So again, I'll show you how that works in a moment. Amazon Q can do all that for you. So it's a chatbot designed for businesses. So let's illustrate some more capabilities with another short demonstration. Wonderful. By the way, thank you for all the thumbs ups and all the encouragement. I am seeing all of your wonderful traffic. It's much appreciated. It means I'm not on my own here, which is fantastic. So we're going now back into the training certification to application. I've already logged in. Over here on the left-hand side, you can see various conversations that I've already recorded. Let's have a little look. What should we start with first? Let me just line up. Here we are. Let's try this one. I am new to AWS Cloud. What course should I start with? So I could type this in, but I quite like saving these, so I can see what it responds with. So here we are. I'm new to cloud. What course should I start with? Now, bear in mind, we've trained it on the training and certification website data. Based on information provided in the data source, I would recommend starting with the AWS Cloud Practitioner Essentials course. So that's a non-technical course that I run, and I agree that's a great start. It's free. It's a 4-hour foundational course. So in Skill Builder, which you already have the link to, that course is free for 4 hours. It covers cloud computing fundamentals, best practices, and so on. The data source also mentioned this course is designed to help you advance your career. Yep. And it's now talking about Skill Builder with 600 digital free courses, and you get the idea. So that's a pretty good response. But I want to take the course. How do I do it? Give me a little bit more guidance. Or I've just seen some more information come through. Oh, Q&A box on the right. Oh, my bad. Thank you so much. Let's have a little look. I've got it under session chat. Oh, I see. It's a different section. Perfect. Oh, right. I've got some. Oh, here we are. Now we talk. We've got some questions. Angel. Let's have a look. What is your favorite feature about Q? You know what I really love about Q? I love the fact that you can upload a document and you can ask questions about it. So I've got a demonstration later where I create a service called Amazon Z. It's a fictitious service. I describe it in some detail in a document. I upload it to Q and I can ask questions about it. And it can summarize, for example, the benefits and what Amazon Z is. It's a fictitious service, but I like that as a nice little demonstration. So summarizing, I think, is one of my favorite use cases. Another good one is actually creative writing. So you'll probably notice here, write a description for a YouTube video called Amazon Q Developer. So that's a real video that really exists. And I took the output, I adapted it, and I used it in that particular description. I also had some additional information about how do I make sure that the keywords in the description were going to maximize the likelihood of YouTube finding it in the search. So there's things like that you can do as well to really craft your prompts. We'll cover some of that later. So thanks for asking that question, Angel. That's a wonderful question. Kia Tarobin, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. What is the accuracy percentage of the information provided by this model? Very difficult to answer. It depends on the prompt, depends how you structure the prompt. To be honest, out of all these recent chats that I've done, it's been highly accurate, but I will call out where it's not quite 100% accurate. And what you can do as well, this was available in preview. I think it's available here. Let's have a little look. No, they've changed it. They used to have thumbs up and thumbs down for each data source. It may be only when I ask it in real time that I have that, but there's an option there to go, yes, that's great, or no, it's not. And that's a really good point, Katarabin, is it's very important that you check the answers that any chatbot gives, whether it's Q or anything else, to make sure it's not hallucinating or giving you any false answers. We'll cover hallucinations and other risks around foundation models a little bit later. Question 3, do you enjoy your job? From James. I love my job, can you tell? So as a trainer, I get to mix with some of the most interesting and most keen learners in Australia, talking about cloud operations, talking about architecture, talking about bread and butter services that help make a difference in the world. So in healthcare, in technology, in insurance, financial services, and I also get to share my passion around generative AI. So even though every course I run is not necessarily about generative AI, I usually manage to slip some generative AI in there somewhere. You can probably tell with my t-shirt. So there's Amazon Bedrock, generative AI service, generative AI, which I'll demo a little bit later. Awesome. Thanks for those questions. They're wonderful questions. Wonderful. I'll flick back between the two. Fantastic. No, I'll just keep up the questions actually, so I can see. So again, keep those questions coming. Perfect. Now, talking about, oh, that's right. We got to here, didn't we? I want to take the course. How do I do it? So to take the course, you can access it through the training and certification website. Great. Data source mentioned this is a free 4-hour foundational course. Correct. The course is designed to help you advance your career. Correct. Additionally, the data source highlights the flexibility of digital chaining and the depth of classroom training available. So it's giving you the free option, which is the best answer, telling you that there's a digital version, but it's also saying you can do classroom based as well. And that's when I might get involved, for example, with a customer. Cool. And again, if I click on the sources down here, not sure why it's not displaying it. Oh, here we are. You can see where it's gained information from. So this has actually come from the cloud operations course. That's interesting. And this one's come from certification. So both have come from that original data source. So hopefully that demo starts to show you the power of Amazon Q. Before we see some more demonstrations, let's talk about some of those challenges that we know about with generative AI generally. So let me find, oh, I've run out of space. I'm going to have to clear some space. Let me just work out which icon I need. That one, I think. So let's clear some space out. My usual one, I can just scroll infinitely, but unfortunately this one, I have to just clean some real estate. A bit like a real whiteboard, right? That's all right. There we go. Got some real estate now. Cool. So let me grab my pen. Oh, if it'll write today. Oh, that's right. I have to put it on this one, don't I? Is that the marker? Yeah, perfect. So Gen AI challenges. I do apologize. My writing is not the best. So let's talk about accuracy, which is the question that I think James just raised. Customers want accurate answers from enterprise content citing sources. Large language models, which foundation models are, large language models are really a branch of foundation models. So foundation models are all the models that we can use, both language-based and text-to-image-based, and to a certain degree, text-to-video, which is coming. So those foundation models cannot answer directly from private data and may generate false responses. And so Amazon Q is designed to provide the most accurate, up-to-date answers possible. But I would always say when you're testing any tool out, make sure the answers are correct. Another important aspect is security and control. So another challenge is enterprises have complex data access controls. Customers, like yourselves, want to ensure that these carry over to new AI tools, allowing safe, secure employee use. For example, you don't want confidential data being used to answer questions in Q when the user is not allowed to access that data. And so there's a built-in feature in Amazon Q that means that when I log in to this particular application, I'm logging in with an identity that's stored in a product called Identity Center. And in Identity Center, I can control who has access to my internal systems. So maybe I don't have access to Salesforce. That means that even if the application I'm using is connected to Salesforce, but I don't have permissions to use Salesforce, Amazon Q is not going to reference Salesforce, even if my prompt has information that would be improved by using Salesforce, because I don't have access to that system, so it's not going to use it. So that's an example of one of the security and control features. And the other thing, as long as I don't run out of space here, let's have a little look. Just about squeeze it on. Time to value. So customers want quicker value and to avoid non-core work. Building a generative AI assistant for employees requires integration with organizational data sources and apps, and that takes development time, which is better spent serving customers, which is why this is a no-code solution. So Amazon Q is designed to address all of these challenges, and you'll start to see this when I unpack this through demos. And so the idea being, we want this to be a business-grade tool that's safe, valuable, and accurate. Awesome. Wonderful. I've got another question. Looks like it's popped up. That's from Surab. The other day I was reading Digital Twin. How easy to achieve with Q and Bedrock? So let me just paraphrase. So my understanding of a digital twin is when we're creating, let's use a car as an example. We might have a car that we have prototyped. And in order to prototype that car, we want to test that the materials that we make the car out of are fit for purpose. And so we can digitalize that car in software, in a piece of software, so I can view the car and I can run simulations as if it was a real world car. And so that's sort of my basic understanding of digital twins. So we can use digital twins to simulate real world, particularly in manufacturing, real world products, and simulate how they might perform without actually necessarily building them. So that saves a lot of time and money. That's a very different area from generative AI. But what I do see the technologies coming together. So I can quite easily see a time, it may already exist at this point, where you're able to use language to interrogate your digital twin and run those simulations in natural language, as opposed to writing code. But Q and Bedrock are very separate and different products. They could be integrated with a digital twin tool. There are some technologies we have at AWS around the digital twin space. I'm not familiar with those, so I'm not going to try and look them up in this session, but feel free to have a look. AWS Digital Twin, and you'll find some services and products there. And yeah, if there's a customer use case around combining digital twin technology with Amazon Q and Bedrock, then that's something that can be done with AWS services. But we need to have a very detailed conversation about the specific use case. Hopefully that starts to help answer that question. That's quite a tricky question, but great question, Surab. Thanks for asking. Awesome. Now, so let's move forward with some key features. So in this section, I'm going to uncover how we create an application. Now, this demo we're going to do is going to be most likely done by the IT team. So there's a little bit of technical, a little bit of, technical knowledge required, but you can see still how reasonably straightforward it is to do this. So I'm in Amazon Q business already. Let me go back to applications. And let me create an application from scratch. Now, before I get too deep, a prerequisite of setting up an Amazon Q application is to set up something called IAM Identity Center. Now, it would take me probably half an hour to go through on the instructions on how to set this up. So here's a wonderful link for you. Oh, actually, I popped it in the chat. Let me put it, sorry, in the questions. Let me pop it in the chat. No problem, Angel. Thank you. Thanks. I can see your question in the session now. Sorry, ignore my question. So I've popped that link into the chat, and that's how we set up IAM Identity Center. Basically, that's a piece of software, a service that AWS runs that allows us to set up identity. So my login at the beginning, when you saw me log in as PA Colmer, I've set myself up in Identity Center to make that work. So that's out of scope. So let's assume we've set it up. We're all happy. That's our enterprise repository for our identities. We need to give our application a name. So Colmer App 2. I'm not going to go through the different service access methods, but I need to make sure that Q Business has the correct permissions. So I'm just going to leave that as the default. I can encrypt data. You can see it's encrypted by default using a service called the Key Management Service, or KMS. So Key Management Service allows me to create my own keys and then use those keys to encrypt data. We can do that across many servers in AWS, and this is how it works with Amazon Q. The application is already connected to Identity Center, so we're good there. That's a prerequisite. Tags are always recommended. I'm not going to do that here, just simply because I just want to speed up the demonstration. So now I'm creating an application. It's going to take a few minutes. Wow. So that's a big improvement from the preview version. So I probably didn't make this clear. Amazon Q in general availability, which means it's available in North Virginia and Oregon. Currently, it's not available around the rest of the world. You can see that here at the top in my region. It's just gone live, which means it's ready for production. During the and that was almost, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? It wasn't long ago anyway. Prior to that, we had a preview version, and this took quite a few minutes. Now you can see that took 30 seconds. So that's one of the improvements that have been made to the app. Now, we've set up our application. That's literally what we have to do to set up the app. But now we need to set up our index. So that's like our vector database. And then we need to connect data sources, and then we can add users and groups. So, two options here. Quickest way to get started is to use the native retriever. You can use an existing retriever, which is Amazon Kendra, if you already have Amazon Kendra set up. If you don't know what that is, don't worry. If you do, feel free to use that option. But I'm going to stay with native retriever. Index provisioning is a driver of cost, but also a driver of how many documents I want to index. So for every 20,000 documents that I want to index, I'm going to use a unit of 1. If I wanted 40,000, it would be 2, and so on. But be aware that that does drive the pricing. So there's two main components here that drive pricing: the per user per month charge. So for me, I pay $20, not me personally, but the charge is $20 USD per month. And then the other driver is how many units I provision. So for a demo, I like to keep it nice and simple, keep 1 unit. I'm almost certainly not going to get anywhere near 20,000 documents. And you can measure the number of documents when you've created your app and you start to index. Let's go next. Now we're going to connect the data sources. So what I did before with my data sources is that I connected something called a web crawler. But there's a range of different, if you like, connectors that I can use, both cloud and on-premise. So let's look at on-premises. This is in your data center. Adobe, Alfresco, GitHub, Confluence, DB2, MySQL, SharePoint, PostgreSQL, Microsoft SQL Server. In the cloud, again, we can connect to SaaS providers such as Alfresco and Adobe, but then we can also see a range of AWS services. Relational database service, MySQL engine, same relational database service, but Oracle engine, Microsoft SQL, third-party SaaS products like Box, Dropbox, Confluence. So if you're using Jira, that's a potential option here. Drupal, GitHub, Google Drive, Gmail, Jira, Atlassian Jira, Microsoft Exchange, Yammer. So it is limited in what you can configure, but there's quite a good range there. Salesforce, ServiceNow, popular integrations, Slack, Zendesk, WorkDocs, SharePoint. Lots to choose from. And this will grow over time, no question. And of course, Amazon S3, which stands for Simple Storage Service, and allows us to store unstructured data in basically objects within a bucket, we call that. And that's a very popular option too. But let's go to web crawler. Here I give my data source a name. So I'm going to call it Colmer data source. This is the easiest way to get started. And I can use a public URL. Now for this, I can use my own website. And the reason I use my own website is not because I like asking questions of myself, although I do quite like doing that, it's quite for fun. It's because I own the website, and if I crawl it, I feel okay about doing that. So be aware that this will crawl whatever URL you're in there. So just be aware that if you're constantly crawling a website, you're generating traffic to that website, and whoever owns that website is paying. So just be aware of that. Cool. So enter the URL. This particular website doesn't need any authentication, but if you're using, for example, a site internally that requires some sort of authentication, then that needs to be configured. Web proxy, again, this is for intranets. If you want to go through a web proxy, you have to. This is the networking construct that I want to use, but I'm not going to use that. If you don't know what VPCs are, have a look. AWS VPCs, what are they? Again, you could use Amazon Q to ask that question. Roles I'm not going to cover, but that basically gives this data source the right permissions to be able to talk to the right services. So particularly Q Business requires this role to be able to talk to the various repositories that are set up. We can then sync. So sync domains with subdomains only is what I'm going to choose. Various settings here that I'm not going to go into because I'll be here all day. New, modified, or deleted content sync. So that's going to update just the changes. And I like to run on demand. You can run hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, and do a custom. But bear in mind, if you're doing an hourly, you're placing the crawler on someone's website and you're effectively generating some form of traffic. So just be aware of that. So I like to run on demand and do it selectively. And then we add the data source. And it looks like I might have missed something out. I have. Silly me, I need a role. So I'm going to ask it to create a new service role. That's the easiest option. It does it for you. You could use an existing service role. And this is going to make sure that Q has the relevant permissions to talk to the relevant services behind the scenes that it needs to. And then we're going to add data source. And this time it's starting to work. Cool. Let me just check for any more questions. Nope, that's just my question there. Fantastic. Awesome. Keep those questions coming. So you can see that's taking a few minutes. It takes about 30 seconds, and it's because of the IAM role propagation that takes the time. Once we finish this demonstration, I'm then going to do an upload demo using a file. So I've added my web crawler. You see it's added. I can add as many data sources as I want. Bear in mind that the index provisioning is 1, which means across all the data sources I configure, I can't exceed 20,000 documents. That's all cool. I click on next because I'm happy with my data sources. I add my users and groups so I know who is able to get access to this. So I'd add my users or groups that are set up in Identity Center and add them in and then create application. And then it takes about 30 seconds and my application is ready to go. Now I'm going to click on cancel just because I don't want to set up new data sources. However, you can see it set up my application here. And then very simply, when I'm ready, I can go into the application. And because I didn't continue with those data sources, oh, actually, no, it has entered them. It's just the last part of that it hasn't done. I can then, when I'm ready, click on that, and click on, it's still creating it because it takes a few minutes to create, and then I can sync that data source. And because my website's not very big, it typically takes about 30 minutes for it to crawl, index the information, and store it into the appropriate index. The native retriever it's called. Cool. So I'm just going to let that do its thing, and I'll delete the application a little bit later. And eventually, once this application is ready, it will be deployed here, and I can click on it via URL, and I can log in using the Identity Center credentials. Hopefully it all makes sense. Any questions, let me know. Wonderful. Now, I did say this was packed full of demos. I don't like PowerPoint, so I'm avoiding what I can. Let's do a demonstration of the file upload function. So let's go back into the AWS Training Certification 2 app. Here we are. And let's have a look at Amazon Z. So I've asked it, what is Amazon Z? By the way, there's no such thing as Amazon Z or Amazon Z, depending where you come from. So it can't find the relevant information. But then what I do is I create a document, a Word document with a couple of pages of text that describe the Amazon Z imaginary service. And then I ask it the same question. Based on information provided in the current uploaded file, Amazon Z is an imaginary self-driving vehicle development platform created by AWS. By the way, this is not any spoiler or anything. I really don't know whether we work anything like this. This is purely imaginary, just because I love self-driving stuff, so I thought I'd write something. And it tells you a few things about it. It provides tools and technology to build the brains behind self-driving cars. I was being really creative this day. And of course, I use Amazon Q to help me generate the document in the first place, the text in the document. So it's ironic that you're using Q to generate the document or generate the text, put it in a document, upload it back to Q and ask you questions about it. That's the irony of your generative AI, I guess. Okay, cool. Okay, so what are the benefits of Amazon Z? Let's have a little look. I thought I'd added this here, but I haven't. Okay, it's a little bit long. Can you summarize in 50 words? Because time is money, right? Let's see what it comes back with. There you go. And maybe I want it to, can you summarize the benefits in 50 words using bullet points? I'm really testing it now. I don't know if this is going to work. We'll just try it out. Oh, there you go. It does. There you go. So you see the power there. And maybe I'm going to do a presentation on it. So write a session abstract for an AWS summit in Sydney. That's gone, by the way. But anyway, write a session on Amazon Z. Always say Q, then Amazon Z. There you go. By the way, when you read my abstracts for my sessions, so next time I'm presenting, I think is the Auckland Cloud Day. I use Generative AI to help me write some of those. I always usually get Q to write several versions, maybe 2 or 3 different versions, and I bring them together and I add my own sort of flavor. And you'll see some of that in the demonstrations I do. Cool. Excellent. So there's some examples of things like text summarization. We've already talked a little bit about safety and security, but let me talk about the enterprise use permissions. So the enterprise use permissions feature ensures that users can only get answers from documents that they already have access to. So for example, if I plug this into Salesforce and I don't have access to Salesforce, it's not going to query that index in Salesforce. And the way it does that is using something called a document access control list. So when I connect to data sources like Salesforce, maybe SharePoint, Google Drive, a Q connector crawls these data sources and stores it in a semantic index for quick retrieval. That's that retrieval component that we configured. As part of the crawling process, we ingest document content as well as the information on document permissions. So in other words, the access control list or ACLs. Let's hope it's not going to go really dark here in a moment, otherwise you'll lose me. Some of the lights are disappearing. I'm just going to stand up and wave my arms. I don't know if it is a touch sensitive. I can't remember how the lights work here. But this could be very embarrassing if the lights suddenly turn off. Cool. And so document permissions specify which users and groups have access to that document. So when a user runs a query, Q gathers information about their groups from the identity provider. In this case, it's AWS Identity Center. And so when we run the query against the index, I think someone might have heard me, the lights have come back on. We check the user and group permissions to ensure that only documents with the right user permissions are returned. So this means that the final responses are only from the content that the user is authorized to access. So very important. Access control lists. What do we call it? Let me just check the terminology. Document access control lists, we call those. So that means you don't have to worry about sensitive information leaking across teams and employees. Very, very important. Amazon Q also provides many guardrails for enterprise administrators to control the experience. So if we go into here, into the console, you'll see over on the left-hand side, is it under applications? I've forgotten where it lives now. Oh, yeah, you have to go to the application itself. You'll see here admin controls and guardrails. So there's various controls that I can place in here. So that's what guardrails are: security controls designed to protect your users and your organizational data. So for example, I can allow end users to send queries directly to the foundation model or the LLM, and I've turned it off. However, what I have turned on is I can allow Q to fall back to the LLM, the foundation model, if it can't find anything relevant to data sources. If I turn this off and it consults the data sources it already has configured and it can't find the answer, it'll say, sorry, I can't answer that. I can do things such as blocked words and also blocked phrases. I can also create specific topics to avoid. So there's some of the guardrails. We call those topic controls. So these default guardrails that protect against queries that's already built into the tool is designed to avoid any generation of offensive, discriminatory, or illegal content. And you can't see those guardrails, but they're in place. And then we have the guardrails that you see here. So another option is to restrict responses to enterprise content only. So I could turn that option off here to ensure that. And so it won't use that outside knowledge of the enterprise data in the LLM. So for example, if we ask, tell me some ways to improve SEO for my web page, and this was off, and the enterprise documents, those data sources for your organization, don't contain the answer, Q will say it does not have enough information. However, on the other hand, if I've turned this on like I have here, Q will use its own knowledge. Based on my knowledge, here's some ways to improve SEO. And then thirdly, like we said here, we can use block words or phrases using topic controls. So this is to help us keep any sensitive topics from being accidentally leaked in responses. So very important, those guardrails and those safeguards. Cool. Right. Should we do more demonstrations? Sorry, you're up there. I realized that the app is there and you're up there. Let's do some more demonstrations. So back to Amazon Q. Now, remember I said, didn't I, that I was presenting at AWS Cloud Days in Auckland. So I've actually asked it this question, as you can see. The session is called Getting Started with Amazon Q. Write a session abstract for the presentation. So here's a lovely abstract for the presentation. So that's a really quick way. And I could ask it maybe make it funnier, make it more engaging. There's all kinds of things I can do with that. So let's do that. Can you rewrite it and make it funnier and do it in less than 50 words? So I am partial to a little bit of comedy, so hopefully it gives me some good comedy material. We'll see what comes up. Here is a rewritten, funnier version of the session abstract. It's been a long day. In less than 50 words. Tired of writing code the old-fashioned way? Let Amazon Q do the heavy lifting for you. This AI assistant can generate test, and debug your code faster than you can say, hello world. There, you get the idea. Cool. Excuse me. Now, you know what? Maybe I want to present this in Paris now, in France, at the AWS Summit. It actually has just passed. It was 2 months ago, but let's assume it's in a month's time after our lovely Auckland Cloud Days. So guess what? I'm going to want to translate this into French. And here we go. Now, not sure how many French speakers we have on the session today, but hopefully you can agree that's a pretty good translation. But no, that's not enough. I'm also presenting this abstract in Spain, maybe in South America. So I'm translating to Spanish too. And hopefully you could agree that's a pretty good translation to Spanish. Look how much time this is saving me. It's amazing. And so some very simple examples of how we can use it with creative writing and use it to help us translate into different languages. That's an important use case. Because think about it. If you're a YouTube creator, for example, and you create a YouTube video in English, wouldn't it be great to use generative AI to translate that video multiple times in different languages and push it out to the world and improve your subscriber count and improve your impressions? So just think about it for a moment. Awesome. Cool. So let's move on now to write me a post about Amazon Q on LinkedIn. See, these are all the things I get up to in my spare time. Write me a LinkedIn post about Amazon Q. Great. It does a post. It tells me the data source it's getting from. It's pretty accurate. It even mentions some customers like Smartsheet, BMW, National Australia Bank. All very good. All referenceable, public-facing customers. Great. But it sounds a bit boring, doesn't it? Make it engaging and add emojis. If you've ever seen my posts on LinkedIn, you'll know I love emojis. So let's spice this up a little bit. Unlock the power of your data with Amazon Q. Amazon Q is a game-changing generative AI assistant that is revolutionizing business, blah, blah, blah. So you can see it's really spiced it up and it's added a few emoticons. Now, the next thing I want it to do, remember that I've pointed it to my website. So digitalcolmer.com. So for those interested in fun things, little plug there, check out my website. Bonjour, Ryan. Fantastic. So hopefully the translation was good. If anyone wants to check out the Spanish translation, let me know. So I've written a number of blog posts. I can't remember how many, maybe 30, 40, 50. And because it's now trained on my style, I can ask it, write the post in the style of Paul Colmer. This is where things get really insane. It's really quite funny. Here is the answer in the style of Paul Colmer. I'm not sure I'd ever write in this style, but I think it's quite funny. Wow, you want me to write a LinkedIn post about Amazon Q? Well, as a senior AWS technical trainer, I'm always excited to share the latest and greatest tech innovations with my network. Amazon Q is a game-changing AI assistant that can truly transform how businesses leverage their internal data and knowledge. Not too bad. Not too bad at all. As you can see, that hopefully was quite natural. If you've ever seen me present before, you'll know I'm a little bit excitable. So I think that's not a bad style. There might even be some humor in there as well. You get the idea. So here's some very simple ways that you can use a product like Q to make yourself more productive, to make your writing more creative. And you can see I'm actually using this for real engagements at AWS. So I'm gaining a lot of great business value from this. Now, let's switch back now to responsible, inclusive, and ethical use of AI. And I'm going to go straight back to my digital whiteboard. So we've talked about some of the challenges. Let's talk specifically about AI concerns, which are not new. There's lots of information in the public domain. And generative AI has really reignited that debate around safe use of AI. So let's explore some of these issues using my whiteboard. So again, let's remove some of this. Quick. I feel at this stage I should do maybe some I don't know, some jokes, I guess. I don't know. It's not rubbing out very well, is it? Oh dear, I've got most of it out. There you go. You get the idea. There we go. I don't want to spend too long. Let's crack on with this. I'm conscious that we only have half an hour left, so I will segue to a little bit of Bedrock in a moment. Cool. So let's make sure we've got the writing tool. So bias. So these are important things to consider when you're using generative AI. So this is not just about the tool that we're using here, Amazon Q. This is broader. Bias. A lack of diversity in data sources impacts the fairness of our foundation model. To avoid bias, it's important that we need diversity and balance within our data sources. So it's important that when we're training our models, bear in mind that we wouldn't be using QBusiness or Bedrock to train our models. We might fine tune in Bedrock. We're probably going to use a service called Amazon SageMaker, where we can host and fully train our models. We want to make sure that the data we feed into those models doesn't have that bias. An example of bias might be an overrepresentation, for example, of a particular gender, maybe too much bias around, too many entries around males rather than females. So that's a really good example of gender bias. Another one is toxicity. So offensive, disturbing, or inappropriate content. It is subjective and it does depend on your culture. So one thing that might be offensive, for example, in American culture, may not be offensive in Australian. So Q already provides toxicity protection. So this is built in. We can also use guardrails in Q, and you saw those topic controls where we can create topics that maybe are for sensitive cultural specific needs. We mentioned this, didn't we, at the beginning? Hallucinations. So an assertion or a claim that is output from a generative AI foundation model, which sounds plausible, but is actually false or factually incorrect. So when you're using generative AI, it's important to test your model and to check some of the key facts against correct answers. And of course, as part of this demonstration, that's one of the things that I've done, is check many of the answers. Intellectual property. Be aware of the risks of using data that's available on the internet to train models and the implications of using it for commercial purposes and any IP implications. If in doubt, seek legal advice. That's really important. And then plagiarism. You've already seen this. It's been popularized in the news. Assignments and academic tasks can be generated using generative AI, and verifying that the work was written by a human author and not an AI tool. So it's important that we're very transparent. And so my suggestion to you always, whenever you're using generative AI, acknowledge whether your work has had AI assistance. So if you look at my LinkedIn and Twitter posts, you'll see that I have some Twitter posts that say co-written with Grok, which is, I just realized I used the word Twitter. I mean X, of course. It means Grok. I've used Grok to help co-write those tweets so you can see. And in the course for Amazon Q, you'll see that it notes that the course has been written with the assistance of Amazon Q Business, which not only is very transparent and open that I am using that tool to help me create content. It also shows that there's a business use case for using that tool. So it sort of has double meaning in many ways. Awesome. Wonderful. I've got a question here. It's too late in the day here. Kataraban, I think that's how you say it. Will Q be able to provide codes for any web or application development for a specified function where it relates to a business? So we're using Q Business here. So Amazon Q Developer would be able to write code for you. You can do that by specifying what you're trying to achieve. So maybe you want to, for example, write a particular function that uploads an object to, say, Amazon Simple Storage Service. And so you can write that in plain English and it will write the code for you. And you tell it you want it in Python, it will do that. And that's a common trend that you'll start to see. And that's how we're recommending customers to use Amazon Q Developer. So we're encouraging customers to use that to improve the productivity of the developers and improve the quality of the code that's written. And Amazon Q Developer can also be trained with the standard coding practices of an organization. So that's important too. So if there's a particular standard that has to be adhered to, maybe in the way that certain functions are created, or maybe in the way that we comment the code, we can build that logic into Amazon Q Developer, and that can come through when customers, that particular employee of that customer asks to write code for it. Does that make sense? Like I said, it's been a long day here. I'll explain that. Okay. This is business we're focused on here. Cool. Wonderful. Now, unfortunately, I don't have time to draw out the architecture. So let me now segue to Amazon Bedrock. So Amazon Bedrock is the tool behind the scenes that Amazon Q is using to feed in the prompt that you see. So it's part of the architecture. Amazon Bedrock is designed for businesses. So first of all, designed for developers, my bad. Amazon Bedrock. I'll quickly show you the page. On the screen. Whilst I'm doing that, I'm also going to prepare my demo because I just need to open up a few screens to speed things up, and I'll do that whilst I'm showing you this screen. So what is Amazon Bedrock? Fully managed service that offers a choice of high-performing foundation models. So we can focus on using the playgrounds, which are non-technical services in Bedrock, where I can experiment with different large language models without writing code. And then when I've chosen my foundation model of choice, I can write code to feed in a prompt and get a response back. And it's really, really easy to do that. Bedrock was the service I demonstrated for Big Data Days last year. Cool. You can see, if you remember Bedrock last year, I think it was in preview at that point. It had very few models. Now we have quite a few. AI21 Labs, Anthropic, Cohere, Meta AI, Mistral AI, Stability AI. Number of providers now, or vendors that are now hosting their models with Amazon Bedrock. And so you can drill into this website and see a little bit more around those particular services. Now, what I'm doing in the background now is I'm loading a service called SageMaker, which is our end-to-end machine learning. The reason I'm doing that is because I want to show you a Jupyter Lab notebook where I have written some code that will talk to Amazon Bedrock. So let me just get that all set up for you. Just loading it up now, and then I'll share my screen and I'll be able to. Here we are, perfect. I'll be able to demonstrate that for you. Before we do that, give me a second. I just need to segue. Cool. So I've mentioned the word foundation models. Let me define that term. They're models trained on massive amounts of general data, such as general text data, allowing that model to then be extended and adapted for different, more specific use cases. And we do that with fine tuning. And so an example of the foundation models that are available to you could be the Meta AI Llama 2 model. So it was estimated to cost in excess of 15 million USD, was trained on more than 2,000 GPUs and took more than 20 days. And so these foundation models in Bedrock are already trained and ready to go. Those vendors or partners have spent time and money to get those models to where they are, and you can use them for the cost of an API call, which is, fractions of a cent. Cool. So that's why foundation models are so important. The foundation models in Bedrock can support a range of use cases, some of which we've already demonstrated. Language translation, text generation, sentiment analysis, so determining the sentiments or emotion of a piece of text or speech. That's important maybe in a call center using Amazon Connect, where we can hear the voice of the customer going, not going the right direction we want it to. Maybe the sentiment is going negative, and we can detect that in real time, and then maybe have a manager come in to intervene or listen into the conversation. That's sentiment analysis. Question answering, which you've seen in Amazon Q. Text summarization, speech recognition, and my favorite, music and video production. So for those that don't know me, I used to be a film composer many years ago, and that's why I ended up with Deep Composer at AWS to start with, because I thought it's a fun, cool service. And all of a sudden, Generative AI took off, and Bedrock was our first product to market. Now, let me quickly share something else to do with Bedrock, and then I will jump straight into a demonstration. So here's some customer testimonials around Bedrock. This is changing all the time. I presented a similar talk to this at reInvent last year, 2023, at Las Vegas. And I asked the crowd, is there anybody here that's had used Amazon Bedrock? And at that point, I think it went GA, I think, at reInvent from memory, or just before reInvent. And funnily enough, one of the customers, it's typical now, I can't find it here, were GoDaddy, which is on this list. So I went through this entire list. It was a little bit shorter then, and said, anybody here from there we are, any of these customers? And there was someone there from GoDaddy. And I said, were you involved in a project for Bedrock? And they go, yes. Can you describe what you did? And they described a real use case around how they were using it, which is very powerful in front of all these other customers. So I was really, really happy with that technique. And so it's important to understand what other customers have done and how they've used the technology, and that helps us improve. Now, Bedrock, like we said, those foundation models are hosted for you. So we're doing that heavy lifting for you. So if you're familiar with Lambda functions, AWS takes care of all the infrastructure. And so Bedrock is very similar in that we take care of not only the infrastructure, but also the hosting of the models. So you can focus on your prompts, feeding into the best model, choosing the best model, and getting the best results out. So that allows you to focus on writing the API calls and generating business value. We call that undifferentiated heavy lifting. And so that's the infrastructure and the foundation model hosting. If you did want to host your own foundation models and train them yourselves, you're going to be using SageMaker, and most likely SageMaker Jumpstart is the quickest way to get started. Awesome. Now, although generative AI is very new, do we think that traditional AI is going to go away? Well, in the words of Monty Python, I'm not dead yet. It's just a flesh wound. I think it's likely that generative AI will coexist with traditional forms of AI and machine learning for at least the foreseeable future. So traditional machine learning problems around, say, fraud detection or data classification can still benefit from traditional AI and machine learning. But then when we have problems around, say, text generation or summarization, we might be using generative AI tools. And I think the most business value we'll see is combining the two technologies together. Cool. So at this point, I'd normally do a bit of sketching, but I'm conscious that I only have 15 minutes left and we still haven't got to the Bedrock demo. So I'm going to skip through the architecture and go straight into the tool. Wonderful. So first of all, let me bring the console down to here. So this is actually SageMaker. I'm just going to back up one. Show you Bedrock before we get into SageMaker. I can see there's another question. Let me have a go at that question. How can businesses measure the effectiveness and impact of generative AI on their operations and outcomes? Oh, that's a great question. So I think it depends on the use case. So if you're looking at productivity use cases, you're going to need to measure productivity. Now, in my experience, I don't think many businesses really focus on measuring productivity, but certainly you need to think about how you might measure that, and that will give you an indication of the improvements. And that could be both using Amazon Q Developer on the development side, but also Amazon Q Business. So with productivity in particular, that needs to be measured, but it really depends what you're trying to gain, what business value you're trying to gain. So it's important in any AI project that you define the business value you want from the project, whether it's generative AI technology or traditional AI, and then you work backwards from that business value, defining the KPIs and then measuring those KPIs. So it really depends on the use case, but very important. Thanks attendee 1. That was anonymous. Not sure who that was. Maybe that's my boss. Who knows? Anyway, cool. So let's get to Bedrock. So I'm just going to type in Bedrock in here. Well, I'm glad to say that the people that were hoovering have gone. So I'm on my own now. Unfortunately, the lights have held out, which is great. So, just a tip. Bedrock now has gone general availability across more regions. So we can see 3 in the US. It's available in India, Singapore, Sydney now. That was at Summit 2 weeks ago. Tokyo, Frankfurt, Ireland, and Paris. So if you want to experiment in those particular regions, you can. There are some other regions here, but I've not enabled them. Not sure if it's available in those regions, but these are the ones I've enabled. It is. Anyway, so I'm in North Virginia, and I can go to these playgrounds that I've talked about. So let's go to a playground. Actually, before we do that, let me give you some information on Bedrock. So when you sign into Bedrock, the first thing that you're going to need to do is you'll need to go to Model Access. And you'll need to, let's get rid of Q, you'll need to go through and decide which models that you want access to. And as part of that process, you will need to read the end user license agreement. My suggestion is to make sure that you have a legal representative read through that EULA and make sure that you're able to comply with it from a compliance perspective. And then you're going to manage model access and tick the boxes you want. So you see it has available requests for some of these models. And then I click on Save Changes. So I don't need to do that because I've got all the models that I need. So that's the first thing. And this is the best place to see all the models available. So AI21 Labs, we've got Jurassic models. Amazon, we've got Titan family of models. Anthropic Claude, we have Claude 3 and Claude 2. I think instant is 1.2. Cohere, Meta, so Llama 3 and Llama 2. This one's an 70 billion parameter model. That's a pretty big model. So different sizes of models. Don't always jump to the biggest model. I would suggest starting off with smaller models, just because the results coming back would be faster to start with. But also these different models have different price points. And of course, the larger models, I think, are going to cost more. Let me just wave my arms a little bit. There we go. We have some more light. I think I was all right with the single light, but I just thought I'd check. Cool. So that's important first thing to do. Once we've done that, we can go to our playgrounds in here and we can start playing. So let me have a think. What do we need to do? Let me show you something. Let's compare two models. So compare mode. So let's select a model. Oh, what shall I use? Let's use an Amazon Titan G1 Premier. That was released only last week. Let's use that model. Apply. And then we're going to select another model. Let's look at Anthropic Claude Sonnet, for example. That's the latest Claude 3 model. And we can compare models. And this is really cool, right? So I don't know about all of you, but I love my craft beer. So I'm going to put in a prompt here around craft beer, if my copy and paste will work. Oh, there we go. Recommend the top 5 craft beer places in the north side of Brisbane. So I live on the north side of Brisbane and I really want to know. So let's run that model and see how we compare. And so this is what you can do to evaluate your models. The way you're going to evaluate the models is you're going to think about the use cases that you're using it for. Maybe you want it for text summarization. Maybe you want it for text creation. Maybe you want it for language translation. You're going to look through all the models. And the way you do that is in overview here. So you're going to click on, say, Claude, Anthropic, Claude 3 Sonnet, supported use cases. So for example, if I'm looking for target time-saving tasks, maybe code generation or quality control, or maybe I'm looking for product recommendations, then these are supported use cases with Sonnet. So that's the first thing we're going to do. Look at all the models and shortlist a number of them. And then maybe what I'm going to do then, oops, I'm just clicking all the way over the place here, is then I can go back to my chat and I can compare those models. I've just lost my configuration. So let me, I've got too excited there. Let me just make sure we reset that and we can ask that question again. So sorry, compare mode, select model, Anthropic, Sonnet. I've got 10 minutes left, so I better get a wiggle on, right? Let's see what it comes up with. And let's run that. And this time, let's not click off. Again, any questions, let me know. Now, I know craft brewing very well, and I know Brisbane very well, so you'll have to trust me to see if these answers are correct. Based on online reviews, in Titan text, Green Beacon Brewing, yes, I agree. Ballistic beer, yep. Never heard of Range, never heard of Netherworld. Ether, I know, that's based in Nunda. So I've already learned from this model, and I did probably do further research, that there are two craft beer places in the north side that I don't know about. That's okay. Now you can see Claude Sonnet's given maybe a little bit more prescription. So Titan Text, I might need to work a bit harder on my prompts and be a bit more explicit about what I'm looking for. But Claude 3 has already been quite explicit without me needing to prompt. So the moral of the story there is different models require different prompt engineering techniques and different words. So Titan Text clearly needs a little bit more guidance, and it will give me a little bit more information, whereas Sonnet is already very explicit. So top 5 recommendations: Slipstream Brewing, I know that one in Brendale. Banyo, I don't know that one. Snap Beer, so you notice it's giving me the location as well, so that's very easy to validate. As over here, it didn't quite do that. In fact, there's quite a few I'm not familiar with. Bray Park, there we go. Really, Bray Pine Brewing, oh, there we go. Oh, learning all the time. Right, so let's say I live in Mitchelton, which is on the north side of Brisbane. Which one is closest to Mitchelton train station? Let's see what it comes up with. Which one is closest to Mitchelton? Sorry, I can't provide that if it might be biased or subjective. So there's some controls in the model here that means it suspects this might not be a safe prompt. And so that's the drawback of building a control. Sometimes they don't always quite work as we want. But if we go over here, it hasn't detected any problem in my prompt, even though it's the same prompt. And it's telling me where they're located. Approximate distance from the railway station. Isn't that impressive? I've not fed this Claude 3 model any additional information. It's all done with the large language model it has itself. And looking at this high level, it looks pretty good because I know roughly where these suburbs are. Very impressive. Anyway, you get the idea. So we can use the playgrounds to provide fast feedback on the models, the candidate models that we're interested in. It's gone really dark here. Let me just move around. I'll be doing this for the next 10 minutes, I think. So I can use this feature to bake off different models and understand the best model for me. Now, once I've done that, I'm ready to start writing code. So maybe I'm ready for Claude 3 Sonnet, say. So when I'm ready to write code, the quickest way to do that is using this Amazon Bedrock workshop, which is available in GitHub. So let me send you this link, Amazon Samples Bedrock Workshop. Now, what you can do, there's some prerequisites to setting up SageMaker. So have a look at how you set up a domain. So you can just put how do I get started in AWS, setting up a domain, and you'll find the documentation. I've got a link here somewhere, but it's not immediately to hand. You set up your domain. Once you've done that, you create a user profile, and then you launch your SageMaker Studio instance. And within Studio, you set up a Jupyter Lab. So let's look at my spaces. And within Jupyter Lab, I can then open that Jupyter Lab. And that's where I can then do what's called a pull request from GitHub on that workshop I've just posted. And you can run the code in that workshop yourself. Now, what I've done, I've actually simplified the code. This demo works. If it doesn't, oh, there we go. We could be in trouble. That might take it might take a few minutes to spin up. Oh, here we are. And here is our code. So for those not familiar with SageMaker notebooks, this is how we can run Python code and make sure that the code is documented in a way that's repeatable. And so I can run each of these cells to produce an output. I haven't pulled the workshop that I said across into here, but this is how you would do it. You would go into this Git function here, and you would clone your repository, put in your URL, which I've just given you, and then that would populate the left-hand side, and then you could run the code in that repository. But what I've done, I've actually got some code here that we use on our courses because it's a bit cleaner. And so let me run that code. So this code here is going to set up what's called a client. So this sets up a connection to Bedrock. What I'm going to ask it is I'm going to explain wave particle duality to 8th graders. So this is my prompt. I've told it that I want a maximum of 300 tokens, and there's some parameters I've tuned here, temperature and top P. We'll cover those another time. Once I've set these parameters up, I need to run that code. I can then invoke the model. So I tell it which model I want. I'm going to use Claude version 2 just because it's a little bit smaller model. I tell it my input and output format, which is in JSON. The response then is what I've entered above. So you can see here the model idea is here, the accept, the content, and the body is this prompt up here with some parameters. And so when we run this code, you can already see it's already been run before. The star means the code is running. This is now running in real time. We should get a lovely response. So here is how I would explain wave particle duality to 8th graders. Wave particle duality is the idea in quantum physics that all particles can act as both particles and waves. Hopefully, you could agree that that's a very, very difficult subject to explain, and I think Claude 2 does a pretty good job of explaining it in a reasonably simple, but not overly simple way. So I know a little bit about quantum physics, and I would probably struggle to explain this, but I love the way it's doing that. So I'm going to reuse that next time I talk to my 8th graders around wave particle duality. Wonderful. Hopefully you can all see that text in your session. It's looking a bit small on my screen, but hopefully you can blow that up. Wonderful. Now, I have 4 minutes left. Wow, I have 4 minutes left. What shall I do? I don't know. Do I have any questions? What I will post in the chat in the last 4 minutes is I will post the API reference for Bedrock. So I explained how this API call worked, but if you want to dive deep and have a look at the other API calls you can use, that link I've just posted there. The API call we're using here is invoke model. You see that one there? And Bedrock is the connection I created up here. So the name of the connection dot invoke model and then the parameters. You can see that's quite easy to code. And this will be similar in any other languages that you might choose. Thanks so much, Chu. Yeah, it is pretty cool, isn't it? Yeah. Hopefully that was worth waiting for. I like to saving the things at the end. I like to save the best till last is what I'm trying to say. It's been a very long day for me. Cool. Let's do one more thing. I've got 3 minutes left. I'd like to use all the time up because that means I'm giving you the most value. Let's go to image. Let's select a model. Should we do a text to image? Let's look at stability AI. This is pretty cool. This is one of my favorite demos. So let's design something. So I popped in a prompt here. A cute, magical flying cat. Fantasy art drawn by Disney, concept artist, and I'm using a number of keywords here to drive this particular model. Remember I said prompts are really important, and when you're doing text to image, certain keywords can help drive really good results in a prompt. So let's run that. Should only take about 15 seconds, fingers crossed. And you see it will give us a pretty good image. And I think that's a nice way to finish off the demo. So again, we can use these playgrounds. There we go, beautiful. We can use these playgrounds to experiment with the models, and then we can jump into our SageMaker Studio Jupyter Lab notebooks to then write the code that we need. There are other IDEs that you can use. I just use SageMaker because I'm familiar with it, and it's easy to pull in that workshop. And that workshop is designed to work in a SageMaker Jupyter notebook. Cool. So I've got 2 minutes left. Let me just recap some of the things that we've covered. So Amazon Q for business is great for non-technical people in your business. You can connect it to other data sources, and you can type a prompt in, and it will use that information from those business data sources, feed it into Bedrock, and provide a great response. We then covered Bedrock, which is designed for developers that want to get a little bit more detailed and write code to call their favorite foundation models, and we can use playgrounds to experiment with that. And then we finished off with a demo in SageMaker, which is our end-to-end machine learning service. We created a domain, which is already created in my console. We jumped into SageMaker Studio, which was the IDE, this. and then we jumped into a SageMaker notebook. All these things have to be created, and then I can pull in a Git pull request from that workshop I showed you, and I can run code. And that is at time, I think. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. This was absolutely wonderful and a very, very much in-depth discussion. I actually learned a lot myself, a lot of new cool features which I did know AWS had as well already. And I think the audience was really appreciating to see a lot of thumbs and clapping and things are going on. I think that throughout the whole session, you already covered quite some questions. I just saw one coming in all the way at the last, and I think that this is more around the commercials because I think they're both more financially related. Let me start with the one from Lewis. What are the potential cost implications of using these kinds of generative AI apps like Amazon Q and Bedrock? What's your vision? And I think the underlying question that I'd like to have is, how can organizations start really kind of thinking about return on investment and making the business case for this?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I can see there that there's a little driver there on the pricing. So let me just pop that into the chat quickly. We're not going to cover pricing; it's quite complicated. So you just got to have a little look at, particularly for Amazon Q and Bedrock, how that pricing works. But I think the most important thing when you're using generative AI is to understand what are you trying to do, what's the business outcome you're trying to drive, and what business value do you really want from generative AI, and how do you quantify that and how do you measure it? Because it's all very well and good going through a generative AI project, deploying these fantastic products. But if you don't have those measures in place, you don't have a clear business case for the value that you want to derive, how possibly can you know whether the investment, the time and money that you spend in these services is justified? So every API call, for example, that you make in Bedrock, you need to have some form of business value for it, because if there isn't, you shouldn't be using it. So that's sort of my very quick answer. We have something called the well-architected framework as well, which is a series of best practices, and there's a machine learning lens. And the first thing we talk about is business goals and use cases. I'll quickly share that with the chat just now while I find it.
Perfect, thanks. And one more question, and I promise I'll let you go afterwards because I know you've had a very long day and it's getting late in Australia. But there's one question that's quite related, and that is, how do you measure effectiveness of these kinds of solutions?
Great question. I think actually this might segue into the well-architected framework. Give me a moment just to pop this in the chat as well. There's quite a few things popping up here. No problem, Katina. Thank you so much for the comments. So this is the well-architected machine learning lens. Let me share it here on the screen. Different pillars. Let me.
Good. I'm afraid Paul, that I've taken over your screen so far. So maybe just put it in the chat.
Oh right, yeah, okay. I've just realised, yeah, you can't see that. Cool. So I think the important part around the business goal identification is really understanding business requirements, understanding what you're trying to do, and in terms of, I guess, measuring the particular value that you want back from your initiative, it ties back to your business value you want to derive. So if, for example, you're trying to make productivity gains across your workforce, you really want to understand how you might measure that. There's no, I guess, easy answer necessarily for that, but that you need to somehow measure, for example, how long it might take for a developer to do certain tasks without generative AI, and then with generative AI, what's the time frame? And so I've been doing a little bit of baselining myself. I've been looking, for example, how long does it take me to write a particular post? And so without generative AI, it might take me 20, 25, 30 minutes. With generative AI, it takes about 5 or 6 minutes. And that's with some basic validation. So yeah, you can see there an order of magnitude, just for me personally, of 4 times, so as an example. And so in a business, you could expect maybe the similar order of magnitude for an employee, maybe greater. So it gives you an idea of some of the business value along productivity lines. But of course, there are many types of business value you could derive from using generative AI. I always like to use the productivity one because I think it's my passion. I'm quite I'm quite passionate about making people more productive and making them better versions of themselves, because that's what I'm about as a trainer, I guess. So that's why. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah,
I think, yeah.
I think it also makes it very tangible to kind of really try to drill it down into a measurable KPI that also kind of then is easier.
Yeah, there's some really good KPIs in DevOps culture. So things like around productivity and around productivity. I'm trying to think what there might be. Let me just think this very quickly off the top of my head. Things like when we're creating features and stories in Agile, are we seeing an improvement in the rate of backlog items, for example, in a Kanban? So, for example, if we're traditionally taking, say, 2 days to clear a feature by a developer, and we're getting it down to half a day because of generative AI, again, that's a measurable thing too. So I'm thinking using Agile, there's some practical measures. Scaled Agile Framework is a good place to start. Again, I'll pop that link in the chat.
Great. Good. With that, Paul, I would like to thank you for giving us again a very, very engaging demo in which people literally saw what the future is going to look like. I was not aware that AWS was at this particular level already in terms of the products that you have, and that could also be rolled out. So that's, I would say, some strong competition for the established brands. So I think that's a very interesting part to take into consideration. Thanks for being with us here at Big Data Days. It's been an absolute pleasure to host you again, and I already would like to ask you to reserve your calendar for 2025.
No worries, Jan Willem. Always an honor and a pleasure to present at Big Data Days. Consider it done. I look forward to seeing you all next year. Thank you all for your comments, and feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, by the way. I will accept all of your connections. Have a great afternoon and the rest of the conference. You enjoy it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And for everyone else, we will continue after this with 2 regular sessions, so no workshops in the next hour. And you will have a difficult choice to make. In track number 1 with me, we will be listening to Eddie Short, who is the founder and managing partner of Transformational Insights. And he is going to be delivering a lecture around delivering business competitive advantage through using data analytics and AI. And in track number 2, we're going to be listening to Pareet Sudha, who's the director of data science at PSA Consultants Limited. And he's going to be looking at peeking into 2034, so a decade from now, unveiling tomorrow's realities. So take your pick, and we will start exactly on the hour again. So you have a short break, and I'd like to see you back soon. Thanks, everyone, and thanks again, Paul.
Take care, team. Thank you so much.